Hello and welcome everyone to another Hasselblad webinar. I'm Mark Whitney, Hasselblad's Photographer Relations Manager, and today's webinar is going to be with Lisa Devlin, a UK wedding photographer and a Hasselblad heroine. So just before we meet Lisa, let's just go through some of the usual slides. So today's webinar is being recorded. We get lots of questions being asked if you can watch the webinar back afterwards. So yes, you can. The webinar will be recorded and we'll download, edit it and upload to YouTube, maybe later today or worst case sort of tomorrow morning. So you can find the webinar there. We'll send you the link in our thank you email. And you can also find recordings of our other previous webinars on there as well. So if you like today's webinar and haven't seen all of our previous ones and would like to see more, they're all on our YouTube page. And a very quick agenda for today, quite simple again. So introduction to Lisa. We're going to be talking sort of Lisa's use of medium format and particularly with weddings and also weddings in general. Lisa's got lots of good tips and advice on weddings. And then also the Hasselblad Heroines project that Lisa was involved in this year with Hasselblad. So we estimate the running time to be around about 50 minutes, which should leave us for around about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. You can ask questions on the GoToWebinar control panel that should be at the side of your screen. That will come through to one of our moderators and we'll try and ask Lisa as part of the webinar. We'll try and ask as many as we can, and if we are able to squeeze it into the conversation as we go through, we will do. If not, we'll try and answer some more at the end. So let's meet Lisa. Are you there, Lisa?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing, Mark?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Yeah, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So I wanted to start by saying I've seen it online quoted that you are called the godmother of British wedding photography. Is that right?
Yeah, well, that was said by a photographer called Igor Demba. And back in the days when we used to chat on Clubhouse in
Okay.
lockdown. So,
Yep.
yes, I've sort of claimed that. I like that. I like that idea.
Yep.
Somebody recently called me the fairy godmother. So I was like, I don't know what
Okay. Okay, so hopefully we'll find out why in the next hour or so. So yeah, a quick bio on yourself. So you're based in Brighton in the UK at the moment, so down on the south coast.
Yes, by the beach.
Yep. Okay. And we'll get into a bit more detail, but we'll talk about how you started in fashion and then worked through sort of music and celebrity photography before then going into weddings. And you're quite a creative wedding photographer, is that right?
I like to think so. Yeah.
And then you've got Photography Farm as well, which is like what would you describe a Photography Farm as?
So Photography Farm is my company that trains other wedding photographers, and that started just after the BJP, where you and I first met. So
Yes. Yeah.
I was getting a lot of questions from other photographers. So that's how I started to do workshops and work with photographers. And yeah, it's just kind of kept evolving and growing since then.
Okay, and we'll cover that a little bit more in our conversation later as well. And then finally, your Hasselblad Heroine was part of our campaign for this year. So how was that for you?
Yeah. Oh, just hugely honoured to have even been on the radar for this, and couldn't believe it when I found out. And then I had to keep it secret for ages, which I'm not really good at. So I kind of
Yeah.
just avoided talking to anyone.
Okay, yeah, that's
um,
the best way.
yeah, but it's so far it's just been a blast. I've just loved being part of it and really thinking about women's roles in our industry and how I can help and inspire other women in particular who are already in the industry or thinking of coming into it.
Okay. And yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. So you've got your website address and your Instagram handle there. If anyone would like to see any more information or images, any more of your work, we'll also repeat that at the end of the webinar as well. So don't worry too much about jotting it down. So what we like to do on these webinars is get the camera bits and pieces out of the way first, just to explain to the audience which cameras you use. So you've been using the X1D2 50C recently.
Yes, so I had to play with a couple of the cameras, but this one for me feels really nice in the hand. It's really light, which was the thing I couldn't believe. and playing around with some of the lenses. Like I sort of ended up with the sweet spot, I think, of the X1D2 and the 65mm. I really love that lens. But yeah, it just feels so nice, the way it fits and the mechanics of where everything is. It's such a logical camera, and of course it's Hasselblad, so just every little detail is really well thought out, even how you connect the strap. Just the little connectors for that, it took me a while to figure them out, and then I was like, of course it's clever, it's Hasselblad.
Yeah, and we always get questions about what lenses people use as well. And I think the 65 was your favourite, wasn't it?
Yeah, I really like the 65 because I shoot a lot of editorial, and I think we don't want anything sort of too wide most of the time, unless you've been asked to really distort things. I shoot wide open as well, so 2.8. I was pushing it at 2.8 a lot of the time. Handle really low light situations. I think we're going to look at some of the pictures that I took in Rome at like sunrise, so that's pretty low light. But there were, I did like a couple of others as well. But yeah, is it the 80mm, the 1.9?
Yep.
Ooh, that's a gorgeous, gorgeous lens as well. Not as much of an all-rounder as the 65, but
No.
I absolutely loved it.
Okay, and when all the images we're going to show today, we've put the camera and the lens that was used to shoot that image in the corner, so everyone at home can see what lens was used. And as you mentioned, you have had a little play also with the 907X camera.
Yes.
So they're fundamentally the same camera, the X1D2 and the 907X, in terms of the platform and the sensor they use, but very different in terms of their ergonomics. But you did prefer the X1D2.
Yeah, so it was great to shoot. Like I did a couple of shoots with both of them, and I would say I probably preferred the 907X in the studio. And when I was out and about, definitely preferred the X1D2.
Okay.
And for me, I naturally sort of wanted to revert to looking down, the waist level viewfinder, which it
Yeah.
doesn't have. And so it was kind of looking at the back of it. It felt like my old 503 CX, but without that viewfinder.
Yeah.
However, it's so tiny. It's so incredibly light. The actual camera bit, you can't believe it's like a slice of bread, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
cracker.
Yeah.
And I did have a lot of fun with it, and it was sometimes where it was just great because it's so you can just grab it and go. It's so maneuverable, and like as simple as it is to use, it's not covered in millions of buttons. It's you need to know what you're doing, but once you do, it's just a real grab and go camera. So when you see something and you want to just get it as quickly as possible, you can.
Yeah. Okay, and for me, it's always interesting to hear people talk about both cameras that they've played with, and to see, it's very much personal opinion as to which one they prefer. So yeah, it's always very interesting to hear. So let's have a flick through some of your images. So how it's going to work today, we've got just a selection of your images that we're going to flick through. We've got a few quotes that we can talk about along the way. And the images are a mixture of test shoots and real weddings. Is that right?
Yeah, and some portfolio work and some editorial stuff you're going to see for magazines that I work for. So yeah, it's a real mixture. I'm quite busy doing different things, but I still love to shoot real weddings. So this is a really sweet couple who eloped in Brighton and just had the wedding reception in their front room. So this is literally just outside their front door.
Wow.
And you can see how sweet the depth of field is looking on that one.
Mm. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. So we mentioned in your bio that you're originally from Northern Ireland, but you come over to pursue a creative art. Is that right?
Yeah, so I moved to Brighton to go to the art college, and I did a year doing the foundation course here at Brighton. And the idea, I don't know if you know, or other people maybe don't have foundation courses, but before you do an arts degree, you do foundation, and the idea is that it helps you find out what you want to specialize in, and you
Yeah.
try everything from like printmaking to painting and textural stuff. And at the end of the first year, I was more confused than when I had began. And the tutors were sort of pushing me into doing fashion and something maybe textile design. But my heart wasn't really in it. So I think I left art college, gave myself some breathing space, and thought what I'll do is get some work experience, like go out in the field and find what I'm good at or really passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's when I thought about styling and photo shoots, because I was obsessed with the Face magazine. Do you know the magazine?
Oh,
And it was,
vaguely, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so there was the Face and there was ID and all those photographers that were coming up in London then, like Corinne Day and David Sims, and just that really cool photography that was around in the early 90s. They all shot for the Face magazine, and I used to get it when I was at home in Northern Ireland, and I was just obsessed. I was just absolutely obsessed with the imagery, and it never occurred to me that it was the photography. So one thing that I tried was going and doing work experience for a fashion stylist. And that was my first experience in a proper photography studio. And that was East London, early 1990s. The photographer was Mario Sorrenti, complete unknown at the time. And he was taking pictures of his then girlfriend and her brother, and a friend was the hairdresser. So we know someone else the makeup artist, and I was just there to assist the stylist. Um, and I very quickly realized that I had absolutely no idea what she was doing, and it wasn't something I was ever going to be skilled at. But once I kind of got over that and just started to watch what Mario was doing, I realized he wasn't doing anything that I couldn't figure out.
Mm.
And I thought, here's this photographer shooting for this publication that I've been obsessed with, that I admire so much. And I'd always been taking photos, I'd always had cameras. And I was like, maybe it's not as technical as I think it is. Maybe you don't need to, really know how to operate every single light in the studio. Like, you need to know, have an instinct for light, which I could see exactly what he was doing. So that was a complete epiphany for me. And that
Yeah.
changed the direction of everything, because I then went on the path to become, to train up and become a photographer. Now, I didn't seek out doing fashion photography because I understood that wasn't actually my specialist area.
Right.
But I kind of did go back to what I thought, like, those portraits in the Face magazine, and my other great love, which was music, thinking about, like, I wanted to work with people in music. I thought, if I could just be anything, I would travel the world with rock stars.
Mm.
6 months later, I was.
Yeah. So do you think it was important? I think we've had other people mention on our webinars how important it is to shoot something that you love. Is that
Yeah.
important?
Oh, and still 20 years later, it's exactly the same thing. Shoot what you
Yeah.
love, because that
Yeah.
passion is what keeps you going, because it's hard work. It's hard work. It's hard work to get the work. It's hard work to do it. It's antisocial a lot of the time. So yeah, you need to have that love. And once I sort of realized that studio photography could be within my realm and something that I could do, I just set out to get as much work experience as I possibly could, and made best use of one very slight connection that I had in the music industry to get my foot in the door. And then I started to work assisting lots of music photographers in London, and one kind of really took me under his wing,
Right.
and I became his second photographer. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of women working in music photography, in the UK anyway. I don't know about anywhere else, but often I was the only woman who was part of the crew. And I just felt was something that I brought that the other male assistants or second photographers didn't, which was a real empathy and an understanding. I could kind of tell when the client was tired and maybe needed a break, or it was time to, put the kettle on or go get some cake, or, so more than like, and I did have to lift all the backgrounds and the lights, and I did obviously have to learn all the technical stuff. But kind of more than that, I think I brought something to the table because I was a woman. And yeah, that led to me having that beginning and getting an agent. So yeah, sort of within 2 years, it was quite accelerated. And that maybe makes it sound quite easy. Like, I wouldn't say it was like super easy, because it was very challenging. Of course, 20 years ago, we didn't have the internet. You couldn't just email people and be quite passive about it. You had to get on the phone and ask people if you could get some work experience with them. But yeah, I soon learned the fine art of making sure that I was, always talking about how I loved their work, what I really connected with in it, and making a really damn fine cup of tea.
Are there any names you could drop for people that you worked with over the
Oh
years?
gosh. I was very lucky. So that photography took me, well, I've got a friend who says never say you were lucky, because obviously these things happen because you open a door, because you make a contact, or because you make a phone call, because you put yourself out there. So to say that it's luck is wrong, and I get that. But it was an incredibly exciting career for me. And yes, I did work with some very well-known people. That photographer that made me his second photographer shot a lot of very well-known rock stars. So Tina Turner, Van Morrison, the Rolling Stones, and so for him, I was second shooting things like Eric Clapton. So I had this incredible portfolio within a couple of years of deciding to be a music photographer, and that's what led to me getting an agent. It was like quite easy. I had this impressive portfolio for someone so young and still learning. And contacts. That industry was all about contacts. So yes, you had to have a great portfolio, but it was really, yeah, making the most of any connections that you could, chatting to people at every single shoot,
Yeah.
chatting to everyone from the couriers to the receptionist at magazines, and just, yeah, always taking your portfolio to people, to let them see it and chat, and taking a lot of people out for drinks or coffees, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And how much of the experience you gained whilst doing that do you think you've now carried over into weddings? Is there much that translates, or?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I shot music for like 10 years. And in that time, periodically, I would be asked, people say, what do you do? And I say, I'm a photographer. And they're like, oh, are you a wedding photographer? Making this assumption that I, for some reason, and I don't know why, because at the time, most wedding photographers were men. But I remember I used to be quite offended if somebody asked me if I was a wedding photographer, because it wasn't seen as a creative genre for the longest time. And when I entered it in the year 2000, wedding photography was still very staged. It was very formal. Photographers typically only kind of turned up for the church or the ceremony, and then did very formal stage portraits and group photos, and then they left. And there became a sort of transition in those times where the photography that was done at weddings started to become a lot more about the story of a wedding and about the behind the scenes, not just these formal shots. And I think I just hit it at the right time. The first wedding I ever shot was for my agent. And first of all, I said, no way in a million years would I be her wedding photographer. And she did a very clever thing, which was ask me to help her find a wedding photographer. And the brochures were so awful. Like, you're talking things like putting a girl in a dress and fanning it all out so it kind of looked like she had no legs, like sitting on the grass, or white vignettes, or putting the couple like in a really crazy pose and then putting it into a like champagne glass. Terrible, terrible comedy, really. And I said, okay, I can't let you have this kind of photography. I will come and do it, but I will just do it as if it's a magazine story, as if I've been assigned to tell the behind the scenes story of your wedding day. And I knew her so well, we were great friends. And right, probably within the first 30 minutes, the process of her putting on the dress and putting on her little crown that she had, and spraying the perfume and all the things that you only actually do on your wedding day, there was this utter magic to it. And I was been working with all of these pop stars and rock stars, and a lot of women who were treated like a princess every single day of their lives, and that becomes quite a tricky scenario sometimes, shall we say. Some of the bands that I was official photographer to. But this girl that I knew really well, and the process of her becoming this sort of princess for one day, this special day, one day, this transformation that happened and all the emotion that went into it, and then bringing together their friends and family and what that meant to them. I just straight away I was like, this is incredible to be able to photograph this, and that they give you this trust and this freedom to do it. and trying to do things like, looking at things. So one of the pictures that I took that was one of her favorites was what her view was before she walked into the room for the ceremony. And I just thought, oh, that would be a good thing to take a picture of, because that's probably a highly emotional moment for her, rather than it wasn't the most amazing thing. It was a bowl of confetti. She was like, it just brought me right back to standing there waiting for the doors to open and to go in. And so I think straight away at that first wedding, I realized I was good at it. I realized that that empathy that I had could work really well for weddings and for couples. And then all my music industry training and working for assignments for magazines and having to kind of work away in the background, that pressure of only having one shot, one chance at it, it all translated incredibly well. And it felt like the most natural move ever to have gone in then to shoot weddings, but that way, like that way, not the way it had been, in a lot of photography studios at the time. So it was an exciting time to be involved, and there was a few British photographers around who are still working, who were shooting weddings at that time, and will know what that felt like.
So after the 10 years of the celebrity and sort of music, then I think I've got in my notes here that you become a little bit sort of tired of the travel, and the thrill of it sort of wore off a bit. So it was good timing for you, I guess, then to find a new genre to sort of to focus and concentrate on.
Oh yeah, I thought after going straight from college into being a music industry photographer, sort of 10 years later, I thought, I've never even written a CV. Like, I've never applied for a job. I've never been for a proper job interview. And I was thinking, like, I don't know if I knew I didn't want to, like, it was great. When I got into the music industry, it was great. There was a lot of money in it. There was a lot of glamour. And sort of 10 years later, there was a lot of transition in the music industry. White labels became a thing. There's no visual imagery on a white label. It's literally, completely blank cover to an album or a song. And digital music started to become a thing. So there was a lot less money in the industry, a lot of people coming in, shooting for free. After 10 years of doing that, I didn't want to do jobs for free. And yeah, working with, shall we say, how do we describe them? Pop acts who were manufactured, who, the TV shows that started to come in by then, and putting bands together who weren't necessarily, that organic process that was manufactured, and the way those bands worked was quite challenging for everyone involved. So yeah, I'd kind of had enough. And so you're right, the timing was perfect for me, because I was just like, right, this is great. What I can do, I can be a wedding photographer. I only have to work on a Saturday and I'll get paid loads of money.
That proved to be the reality.
Mark, it kind of was. It kind of was, like, in the beginning. You remember we didn't have to sit all week on Lightroom then. We didn't. The lab came and sent a bike and collected the rolls of film for me on a Monday, and delivered them back a couple of days later. And my editing process was sitting here with a waste paper basket, just putting prints in the bin, and deciding which ones to keep, and sending proof prints to my client, making pretty albums. The week kind of was yours. And I always resented digital photography, and I resisted switching across to shooting weddings digitally for quite a while because of the workflow. And I never got into this to be sat at a computer to be editing my own photos. I got into this to be out shooting them, to be connecting with people, to be having adventures. The shooting side of it, I've always hated. I never even loved the dark room. Lots and lots of photographers love the dark room. They love experimenting in there. I hated the smell of the chemicals. I hated having to be in the dark. I found it really claustrophobic. And of course I had to do it because it was so expensive to have your work printed. But I kind of felt the same when it came to having to put my work into Lightroom. So I've become one of the fastest editors imaginable because I just want to get it done.
So if you were, so what camera were you using back then when you first started weddings?
So I shot Canon. I shot Canon for the longest time. So I was using the Canon EOS 5s.
Okay.
And so my philosophy has always been to invest sort of in a top of the mid-range camera body, and then the best lenses that I possibly could, and to really spend the majority of my budget on the glass, because I realized that that's what made the really big difference in your images. You know, photographers who just go around with the kit lens and they're like, why do my pictures not look that good? So yeah, it's Canon, shot Canon for a long time, went on to then the 5Ds and went all the way through to the 5D Mark IV. And yeah, so, and then switched to mirrorless.
Okay. And you said earlier about sort of one of the pressures of weddings really is having that sort of one opportunity to maybe capture a moment. You know, how much pressure is that? Do you find, you know, do you thrive off of that, or does it make you nervous or anything like that?
I mean, yes, I sort of thrive of it, and I like that it's never the same, and you never know exactly what you're going to get. And I think if you have a natural curiosity about people, wedding photography can be a great career because people never stop amazing me, ever. And that chance to just get one sort of shot at it, yes, like it is a lot of pressure, and I do still get nervous before every single wedding. I get really nervous. I kind of really only sort of reduce my anxiety when the ceremony's been done, the main groups have been done, the portraits have been done, and you just sort of everybody at the wedding's relaxing, and you're just kind of recording what's going on. But yeah, I still find it highly pressurized. I never just turn up and think, oh, I'll just waltz through this day, and I never leave a wedding thinking I utterly nailed that. I always think of all the pictures I didn't take instead of the ones that I did. So that's never changed. So yeah, weird.
Yeah, like if I think to my own personal wedding, you know, the one thing that we've still got now, my wife and I, is the wedding album. That is the only thing we've now got really, apart from our obviously our memories in our heads. But that's the one thing we've got to look back on the day. So you know, if photographers know that, and obviously they do, just whether that creates a certain amount of pressure in capturing those memories, I guess.
I think it does, because I think as a photographer, you bring a lot of yourself to it. Like you could send 10 photographers to the same wedding and they would all take a different set of pictures, because there's so much of you that's there at the second you decide to take a picture. The things that you personally are drawn to or obsessed with, and the moments that you choose, you select. It's like live editing. Yeah, you're live editing, selecting what you're actually going to take a picture of on that day. Because say you're there for 10 hours, you know, you're going to end up taking, I probably on average take between me and a second photographer like 5,000 images. So I don't know how many that is per time that you're there, per minute that you're there. But of course there's selection process, and the only way you can try and align it with your couples is to try to get to know them in advance as much as you can, and to never turn up already with images in mind that you're going to shoot, because that's you bringing your own wants to it. And never make assumptions about their relationships. You know, not every girl is close to a mum, or you know, these days we don't know the dynamics of a family, and you have to invest time beforehand, and especially on the day, trying to get a sense of what their relationships to those other people are like as well. And I think when you do a good job, that's what's reflected back to them afterwards. So more than what they did on the day, it's what they felt on the day.
Yeah, and I think the quote on the screen at the moment is very good as well, in terms of, you know, it's not just what's in the photo, but it's the memories it provokes, you know, like the smells and other details. So is that always something you have in your mind?
Yeah, and that right from that first wedding that I shot for my agent and took that picture of the bowl of confetti, and one of the things she said was, it makes me think of how it smelled, because it was a bowl of dried petals, so there was quite a strong floral smell. And that was just the immediate lesson that if you can do that somewhere else, that's trying to put yourself into their position. So things that can work really well is taking a picture of the reception room from where they sit. That's their view of it. A picture of each of them and getting them to look at each other sort of as close to you as possible. So that's how, you know, what's exactly what you're seeing. And sometimes when I'm doing that with a couple, I'll say, get your phone out and take a picture of each other on your phone, so you've got it immediately. But I'll give you the fancy version. But you know, this is what you look like to each other on your wedding day.
Well,
But of course,
yeah,
sometimes some couples are not that emotional, and you can't, sort of try to orchestrate emotional situations for them. Sometimes as a photographer, your job is to hold back and let things, whatever they are, that they're going to progress, and that's your job to let that happen as well.
yeah. So you say you like to try and get the couples to to understand them a bit more and understand the dynamics of them and their families. So how much time do you spend with them before the wedding day? Is there a certain like process you go through, like a pre-wedding shoot and meetings and things like that?
Yeah, ideally with all my clients, and I don't charge them extra to do it, is a pre-wedding shoot. And I've got a wedding coming up in Brighton for a couple where we actually went to the studio and did it. I had this idea for a little while and thought, wait for the right couple that would be interested. They're really passionate about photography themselves. They work in the media, and I pitched them the idea, said, how about coming into a studio to do your couple shoot rather than, I don't know, a park or a pub or things that they tend to be done in,
Mm.
and gave it that kind of fashion edge for them and that formality. And we played with different relationship situations between the two of them. They brought their little dog. It's very much, their fur baby, and the dog was in some of the pictures, but not in a twee way, like he's yawning in the front of the frame and things like that. So that just process, that's really nice to spend time with them, and wherever you do their pre-wedding shoot. And then as their wedding's drawing closer, it's a few weeks away, I will get in touch with them and have a chat with them. Probably they're local to me, so we'll probably actually just go for a drink. And because they're really into photography, I want to try and approach shooting their wedding. I want to kind of tap. I've been really reflective recently, and I think it's probably getting the the Hasselblad Heroine and the award, and having to think about that and think about the stages in your career. And I kind of want to tap back into what I was like in that first wedding. I was a music industry photographer shooting a wedding. I wasn't a wedding photographer, and somewhere along the way, I've become a wedding photographer. And I don't know
Mm.
how to explain that, but you're taking wedding photographs. I want to take photos on a wedding day. And I think there's almost a trend for that. Like when we look at celebrity weddings right now, and this maybe was started by Kim and Kanye, but they didn't have a wedding photographer. Do you remember the story? They had
No.
booked Annie Leibovitz, I can say the name. They had booked her as their wedding photographer, and they were getting married in Italy. And right at the last minute, the day before the wedding, the deal with her fell through, and they had to get another replacement photographer. And they spoke to a friend who was in the music industry, and he called up this really young kid, like I think he's 23, from Liverpool. He was sitting in his mum's house, hung over to hell, got a call saying, can you come to Italy and shoot my friend's wedding? And he was like, I never shot a wedding. He was like, doesn't matter, just get on a plane. Got there, found out it was Kim Kardashian and Kanye West's wedding. And this kid, shot it. But the pictures, like, it's fascinating to see what he shot.
Yeah.
And they were like, he was like, do you need me to do? And he was like, just do whatever you want. Give him a complete free reign. And there's been quite a few celebrity weddings that have done that. Lena Dunham, the actress, she had a photographer and had shot weddings before. He worked in the music industry. Her partner is in the music industry. She had Taylor Swift as a bridesmaid. Got married in London. The pictures I'm obsessed with. They're so fascinating. They're kind of so different from what wedding photography is. And
Yeah.
I've been looking at others recently where the same thing has happened, and I'm like, I used to be that. How I want to tap back into that. So I think I've got a couple of weddings coming up with the right kind of clients, and that's the mindset I'm hoping to get
Yeah.
to. But it's like the longer you do something, the longer you get into habits, and
Yeah.
I just want to break that and break the assumptions, break turning up with my preconceived ideas, and have a play with it, see what we end up with.
Okay, so what about post wedding? What's your process after that? Do you normally shoot for an album or do you present prints? What would you normally offer?
So I used to be the person that would design their album, and I still shoot very much with the idea of an album in mind. To me, that feels like you'll shoot both the A roll and the B roll. So there'll
Yeah.
be moments that are photographed because they would be good supplementary images to tell that part of the day. And I still do that, but I'm not actually the person that does the albums anymore. So with all this technological advancements that we have, some of the software and the services around wedding photography are, time saving and absolutely fantastic. So my galleries are published with a company called PicTime, and
Right.
they, as part of that, the client can design an album themselves. So it gives them a virtual version of it. So when they start looking at their wedding photos, it has an algorithm that will even push their favorites to the front, and it will pre-design an album. And when they go into their gallery, it will say, hey, have a look how this album looks. Would you like to order it? And they can make adjustments. They can make as many as they want. And if they struggle, they can let me know and I will go in and design it. But yeah, that's been working incredibly well recently because I don't have to do any additional work, and it's extra money coming from each and every wedding. And it's they've said that they find it quite good fun to design their own wedding albums. So that's where we're at now with wedding albums.
Okay. So I guess the wedding market, in my experience or knowledge of the industry, is very competitive, and you've got this quote that we've got here on this slide. So there's a lot of I guess amateur photographers maybe that are thinking, oh, I could be a wedding photographer, and just because they've got a semi-decent camera, they think they can just go out and do it. So yeah, I guess that quote is aimed at that. Is that right?
I mean, I think so, rather than maybe not necessarily sort of amateurs who think they can go and do it, but people who are new to the industry and just really keen to get going, and the sense that there's maybe you can skip the skills part, you can skip that part of the process because cameras are so great, of course, these days. The cameras do help us so much. But it's an impatience. They just, like me, they fall in love with the process of shooting weddings and they just want to get going. And I'm like, you need to learn your craft. Like, don't skip that bit. It's very important because we encounter so many different situations on a wedding day, like, lighting wise and even relationship wise and timing wise. And however it looks on Instagram and Pinterest, usually when you're turning up, it's like there will be moments where you're, spraying and praying.
Okay, and you mentioned lighting there. So do you ever use, we've had a question actually, whether you ever use flash for your images. So I guess you do in the studio, obviously, but do you have any portable flash on wedding days or anything like that? Or is it just ambient light?
Yeah, no, I really like Flash, and I think Flash is having a big resurgence. And again, this celebrity weddings that we're seeing, if you think of Brooklyn Beckham's wedding, there was a lot of direct flash used then. And it's that sort of Vanity Fair party vibe, makes everybody look like a celebrity. So wedding photographers have been, it's a technique as old as time, just direct hard lit flash straight in the face. Something that I've been using at weddings, but I've always used flash in various, probably more than people think. Sometimes balancing it, just trying to get a little catch light in the eyes. Sometimes shutter drag at dance floors and playing around with that part of it. But yeah, I do love flash, and I've got the Godox V1, which is like a real powerhouse, like a really fun flash to have.
Okay. Another question we've got is from Michael. He's asking, do you work as a team? Do you have assistants with you on the day?
It depends on the size of the wedding, and it's sort of post-pandemic, anything goes. So I've been shooting a lot more smaller weddings recently, elopements, micro weddings we call them, shorter coverage. So with those, probably go and do them on my own. Anything over about 8 hours, I bring a second photographer. So I don't have anyone that's like a regular team member. It's just working with photographers that come to me through Photography Farm mostly. So there's been quite a lot of them now, and it's an extra bit of training I could do with them on the day.
Okay. Another question. Question from Jordan. He's saying that they love their X1D2, so that's good to hear. But he's asking how it works for you. So the medium format is generally a slower way of working to sort of other mirrorless cameras. 35mm mainly. Do you ever find that that's an issue on a wedding day, where you may need to capture a moment quickly, or do you use different cameras depending on what you're shooting? Like the medium format maybe for the for the post shots maybe.
Yeah, I have shot weddings entirely on medium format, and I tell you what, like that, talking about like just being able to kind of grab a moment, like I did grab a shot of a girl where she was just doing something really interesting, but I'd just come out of their ceremony and it had been 1600 ISO. It was really dark in there, just one window light, and then she was out in full sun, and I just grabbed the picture because I knew I didn't have time to change the settings. And I have to say, like any other camera, it would have been like utterly binned. It was so overexposed, couldn't see any details at all. And then I just thought, I wonder what I can actually pull back. I mean, the dynamic range is phenomenal. Pulled it back hardly at all, and it just looked exactly perfectly exposed. So I think that as a wedding photographer is when you really see the power of medium format and of the X1 D2. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, if you're actually a terrible photographer at weddings, it's going to save you so many times. But most of the time, what I'll do is I'll take the camera and do a mixture kind of through the day. So, if your ceremony room is quite dark, then maybe it's a little bit more challenging to use it, but then have a real play. I just don't ever want to be bored. So when I think, oh no, this isn't a situation where I would use this particular camera, that I will actually use that particular camera to see what I can get as well. So just to challenge myself and challenge the cameras as well, because mirrorless, you can see what you're getting. So it's have fun with it. Always have fun with your photography.
Okay, and sticking with sort of medium format and weddings, we've got a question from Eric. He's asking, how do you feel wedding photography with medium format compares to 35mm in terms of like workflow and image quality? And do clients notice and appreciate the difference?
So in terms of workflow, I've been asked that before. It doesn't slow me down at all in post-production. I think it's just the same speed for me. In terms of quality, you will see a difference. You will see a difference. You will. It is skin tones, fine detail. Obviously, weddings, we're working with girls with white dresses a lot of the time, and the places where other cameras will maybe lose some detail. Hasselblad always retains it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing is when you arrive at a wedding with a Hasselblad, like everybody knows what that is. They take you really seriously. There's no Uncle Bob there with the same camera as you, and the amount of respect that you get. And I think when if you're pushing into the luxury wedding photography market, then I would definitely be showing up with high-end cameras to mark myself out as someone who was, really top of my game. But yeah, you will see a huge difference. So shooting them side by side is super interesting, and I've done that a fair bit, both in the studio and at weddings. And there's nothing wrong with any of my other cameras. I do always love the Hasselblad ones just that little bit more. And we're in an Instagram age. You know what the other thing is? They fit the grid a bit better as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we've got I think you mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the cameras and the lenses, and you've got a quote here, sort of invest in lenses. So what is it that you look for in a lens? Is there a particular quality that you look for, or what's your selection process there?
I shoot wide open. I f2 all day, every day, so I want to shoot wide open. That's my main priority with lenses. I don't want a lot of distortion most of the time. I don't want heavy sort of vignetting, anything like that. So I'm looking for nice and clean and crisp, and yeah, letting me, get as much light in there as possible. When you shoot like this in the studio, so it's shot for a magazine, this is going to be printed relatively big, and I want this. Obviously, it's a very expensive designer dress that's been shipped over, especially for this shoot. I want to still be able to see that lace and all of that detail, and the florist has invested a lot of her time and money on that bouquet and things like that. So yeah, it's just a whole different level shooting on Hasselblad as opposed to shooting anything else, and it's been such a privilege. So yeah.
Okay. Let's squeeze another question in. Another question from Michael. He's asking, how many shots do you typically shoot at a wedding?
So between, if it's me and a second photographer and we're doing sort of 8 to 10 hours, you're looking at around 5,000.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of that is when you do group shots, you just do as many versions as you can so that
Yeah.
eyes being shut. However, if you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of pictures to cull and edit, I use some AI software. So the AI tools are where it's at. Like this year, that's been one thing that's kind of come out for the last couple of years that's really revolutionized it. So I use AI to cull. So the AI software will pull out the pictures that are, eyes are open, they're most in focus, things like that. They don't bin any images. They just give you notifications, and it's up to you whether you want to keep them or not, but makes the whole process much, much quicker. And then I use another company to use AI to edit the pictures as well. And I've been kind of fine tuning that over the last year while I've been working with them. So yeah, robots, where it's at.
So
So
is that
now
where it
anything,
gets to learn? Does it sort of learn what you like in an image edit, and then
yeah.
does it like that, or?
Yeah, so it's a company called Imagine AI, and you teach it. So the first thing to do when you set up a profile, they're called, is you send it images that you've already edited, and anywhere between 5,000 and up to 50,000. Now that sounds a lot, but as a wedding photographer, I put 45,000 images over to that thing, and so that's all like different lighting scenarios, different times of year, like just send it everything, so it learns, and then it creates a profile for you based on how you edit yourself, and you can get it to straighten all your pictures. I don't know. All these questions are from men. If there's any women watching, for some reason women shoot sort of at an angle more than men do. So I would happily drop money on to somebody straightening every single picture that I shoot at a wedding. So yeah, it straightens them, and then just there's about 40 parameters that it works to edit your pictures, and it takes 1 second per picture.
And I guess the results are good for you to
Phenomenal.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
phenomenal. You won't see the difference. Like a picture I've edited or a picture the robots have edited, not a single bit of difference except my time. So
Yeah.
it's been a really big thing to claim back time. And then sort of thinking, taking bookings going forward. Before I would not take bookings so close together, and all of the school holidays and things like that, because I knew I'd have to be editing them. Now I'm like, now I'm not spending hours and hours and hours editing at all. It's just like half a day, it's done.
Okay, and so you say about like 5,000 images. What would that what on average, what would that be whittled down to in terms of selected images?
Probably, I'm an over deliverer. I know I am, but I think when it's your wedding photos, you could look at, so many. Probably an average gallery that I deliver is about 800 images. And
Right.
interestingly, sort of this, for instance, the wedding I shot solely on Hasselblad, I actually shot 1,300 pictures, but I still delivered 800. So I think that's a really good way to think about working with medium format. Yes, it's slower, but
Mhm.
that gives you more time to be accurate and to be considerate. So you're looking at the edges of your frame, making sure your exposure is as good as possible. You've got that time to be considerate. So I
Yeah.
actually end up with about the same amount of images, but less time
Yeah.
having to process them.
Yeah. Similar to how it was in the film days, I guess.
Yes, and I've been having a little play with film recently. I was shooting some film this week, and I was shooting on my old 503, and gosh, it took me a while to get that thing focused. And it was like,
Yeah.
I work in the music industry, like this was it. Like we had them connected to the studio lights. This was what we used. This is how we worked. 12 frames in a roll of film brought me
Yeah.
back. So it's kind of full circle. And I see all these photographers now, especially in weddings where they're shooting fine art and they're like, I shoot film, and it's like they're really revered. And I'm just like, it's hard work. It's super hard work. And of course,
Um,
nobody's having their images printed from those negatives. It's all from scans. So I'm kind of like, just go straight to the digital.
okay. And do you ever use manual focus now, or do you always have the autofocus option?
Sometimes depending what it is, but yeah, most of the time it is autofocus. I mean, you've got enough to think about with your exposure and your framing, your composition. So if there's one, some of those things that the camera can do for you, then yeah, definitely focusing is one of them.
Okay. So yeah, just tell us a little bit more about photography finance. So you say that you were asked lots of questions following. Yeah, so just to explain a little bit, you mentioned earlier that we met several years ago, actually, where you won a competition with the British Journal of Photography, a publication here in the UK, and they were having a wedding competition called Unveiled,
Mhm.
and Hasselblad were the sponsors. And as I say, you won the competition, and part of that was some shoots you did with a Hasselblad camera at the time. I think it was an H4D. I don't know
Yeah,
if you remember. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, H4D was that sort of era. So yeah, and you had a lot of questions following that. Is that right?
Yeah, so winning the award really opened the door to other photographers contacting me, and it was kind of crazy for a while. So it was taking me till lunchtime each day to go through my inbox after winning the British Journal of Photography. So thank you. Um, but I was getting asked a lot of the same questions again and again, and it occurred to me that if that was the case, maybe I could get some photographers into a room and go through some of these questions at the same time. And that was how my first workshop happened. Um, and that sold out really quickly. And I did another couple. And I was like, if people still want to keep coming and learning and having a good experience doing this, I will keep expanding what I'm doing. That led to Photography Farm being born, because we started doing workshops in a property that had been a 15th century farm, but it was really most known for being a recording studio, and it's where Queen were resident quite a lot of the time, and Freddie wrote Bohemian Rhapsody there.
Okay.
So it had that rock heritage that I loved. And we, still had all the staff that used to look after all the bands, and they would look after all the photographers who attended the workshop, and that's what we were sort of doing. And then grew into, so now I offer a conference in the spring, and I do mentoring sort of one-on-one in groups with photographers, and lots of different ways of educating photographers. And as long as they keep coming, I'll keep offering it.
So does it differ at all from other sort of educational programs that are available? Is there a unique aspect to it, do you feel?
I feel probably the thing that's unique about Photography Farm is we really focus on the creative side of wedding photography. And that, because I'm still a working wedding photographer as well, so I think I'm obviously the heart and soul of Photography Farm. So I think that people come to me because they see that, and they still think, well, if it's still working for you, then is there something that, that bag of magic beans that they want to get. We're a real community now. Like, that's one thing that I hadn't really thought about when I set it up, and that side of it was kind of started by the first group of people that came to my residential workshop at the farm. They started a Facebook group, and that group's now grown to like sort of 1,200 members. And the support that they give each other, especially through the last couple of years when it's been really challenging times in weddings and for wedding photographers, and it still is still a lot of people having situations that where weddings need to be covered last minute. So as a community, they've really rallied around each other and given a lot of support.
Mm.
So it's way bigger than me than now, and I'm just still enjoying it. And I love to meet photographers right at the beginning of their careers, or photographers who've been going for a long time like me. We've all got stuff to learn from each other, and it's been incredibly rewarding, especially mentoring photographers who are really getting into lifting up the bonnet of their business and getting some incredible results with them. So I've done quite a few rounds of my mentoring program now, and some of the photographers that have been through it are now full-time wedding photographers, booked out for the next 2 to 3 years, smashing their goals. And a lot of that is women. So yeah, it's been really great to kind of give back.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just finish off. We've only got 5 minutes left, so we'll just finish off with the Hasselblad Heroines. So as I said earlier, you were part of this year's campaign, the 2022 campaign. So this is where Hasselblad highlight and showcase women in the photography industry and help to give them a platform. So yeah, what was your experience for taking part in that?
So when you first sort of got in touch and spoke about it, and I thought, do I, as a woman, have I had a more difficult journey into photography than I would have done as a man? Because I was thinking, am I sort of consciously like, and then I thought back, and I just thought of so many different times that actually it was exactly that. One of the early sort of days of my music industry career, I sent my portfolio to a well-known pop magazine, and it came straight back with them saying they never use women photographers. They said, we don't use female photographers. And I said, why not? And this was a woman editor, picture editor. And she said, oh, we used one once and it was terrible. We had a really bad experience with her. So all women were banned from shooting for this magazine. And I thought, well, that's I can't even get my foot in the door. What am I going to do? And so, you know, I just took the Lisa off my name. I sent my book back as Devlin, and I sent my book to all the magazines then as Devlin, and I printed my business cards as Devlin. And I got my foot in the door, and I spent a lot of my music industry career meeting people who said, "Oh, I didn't know you were a woman." So it started to make me think, you know, it can be extra challenging. And so how can I help and encourage other women? And I think by leading by example, showing that, you know, there is maybe you just have to be more creative with how you get to your end point, how you get, you know, smash your goals, how you do those things. And also think about what your strengths are as a woman, what the extra things that you bring, you know, and talked earlier about that empathy that I feel like women can often have. So play to your strengths, all of us.
Mm. And the quote on the screen now, you know, even things like that,
Mhm.
in regards to a lot of the speakers at conferences being male.
Yeah, I mean, totally, totally. And you know what I did about that was I started my own conference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because and now the men work for me. Go
yeah,
figure.
yeah,
Yeah, it frustrated me. You know what it was, Mark? I got fed up being the person who was kind of coming home from a photography show and moaning about how male dominated it was. And so if I'm
mm,
going to keep moaning about it, I need to do something about it. And so I do apply to speak at places. I do quite often get knocked back. I haven't, heard from a particular sort of big photography show here in the UK this year from the applications that I put in. However, I am going to Vienna later this year to speak at the really prestigious Way Up North wedding photography conference. So things like that, and that's probably happened to me because I'm one of the heroines for this year, and that's raised my profile again. So yeah, just keep knocking on the doors. Keep, if the door shuts in your face, just jam your foot in it.
yeah, yeah. And I guess like the Unveiled competition, I think you've had quite a bit of response to being part of the campaign. Is that right?
Yeah, I couldn't so many things that opened for me. I went to New York and spoke because of it. Just yeah, the opportunities that I had, and then the shoots that I did with the kid, and it was great. There was a point where I could ring up and say, "Can I have a wind machine?" And you were like, "Yes." So yeah, and I applied for Unveiled thinking I didn't think I was going to win it. I really didn't. I just thought I will get on the radar. I will experience what it's like to apply for something like that, to curate your work, making a choice of what to submit. And I just remember thinking, okay, these judges, if all they're doing is looking at image after image of big formal weddings, maybe I'll send something really informal and fresh and a bit different. And that seemed to work, obviously, because we're here.
Yeah, rest is history. Yep. Okay, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, Lisa, but unfortunately we've come to the end of our hour slot. Yeah, so thank you very much for sharing the stories and your advice with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a real pleasure, and I really feel so honoured to be in the programme and to have been able to talk to you today.
Great, yeah, thank you very much, and hopefully see you again soon. And as I said earlier, there's a quick recap of Lisa's website and her Instagram handle if you'd like to see more of her work and follow her and maybe get in touch. And also, we've talked about Photography Farm. So if you want more information on Photography Farm, Lisa, the organisation that Lisa runs, educational platform, there's the web address and the Instagram handle for that as well. So please go and check it out. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, there will be a survey that pops up as you exit the webinar. It will be much appreciated if you're able to help us give some feedback. Be much appreciated just to spend a couple of minutes. It helps us to understand what we're doing good and what we could do better and what else you would like to see through these webinars. Also, another quick reminder that the webinar has been recorded. So we'll hopefully have the recording of the webinar up on the Hasselblad YouTube page, worst case by tomorrow morning. So you'll be able to watch it back there, and as well as all the other previous webinars if you may have missed those. And of course, for anything Hasselblad, you can also go to hasselblad.com, where we've got everything on there from all our future webinars and events that we do. Lots on our products, of course, our partner network around the world, lots of inspirational images and stories, lots on Hasselblad's history. You can also request a demo of any products you would like to try, and also request any support that you may need. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.